She called the cops and pointed at me like I was a criminal. "Arrest him! He's stealing HOA property!" I was standing in my own yard. Holding the fence post, they moved 6 feet onto my land. The patrol car hadn't even fully stopped when Karen walked up to it like she owned the badge. "He destroyed community fencing," she said loud enough for every neighbor to hear. "He's unstable." Unstable. I looked at the officer and calmly said, "Sir, that fence was built this morning. On my property." Karen laughed. Not nervous, confident. "This land belongs to the HOA easement. We adjusted the boundary. It's already approved." Adjusted. That word stayed in my head. Behind me, my 8-year-old son was standing on the porch holding our dog's leash. He whispered, "Dad, are we in trouble?" That hit harder than her yelling. The officer asked for paperwork. Karen pulled out a bright white folder with the HOA logo stamped on it. "Survey update," she said proudly. "Signed by the board." I didn't even look at it. Instead, I walked to my truck and opened the glove box. I pulled out something older, thicker, county stamped, recorded 15 years ago. The officer studied both papers. His eyes narrowed slightly. Karen crossed her arms. "He's trying to intimidate us." "He does that. Thinks because he's a veteran, he can scare people." I hadn't told her that. That detail wasn't public. I stayed quiet. The officer looked up. "Ma'am, this document you have is not a county survey. It's an internal HOA redraw." Her smile flickered. "Just for a second. It's valid inside the community," she snapped. "Yes," he replied calmly, "but not outside recorded county lines." The neighbors started whispering. Karen's tone changed fast. "Fine. Even if the line is off, he removed HOA property." That's destruction. I looked at the officer. "Would you like to see the original markers?" He nodded. I walked 20 feet to the old iron stake half buried in the grass. I brushed dirt off with my boot. The county seal was still visible. The officer exhaled slowly. "This marker hasn't moved." Karen's face turned red. "He could have planted that." That's when twist number 1 hit, pointed toward the small black camera, mounted under my roof. "Everything from 3 a.m. is recorded," I said. "Including your contractor moving that fence?" Silence. One of the neighbors pulled out her phone. "Wait, you moved it first?" Karen spun around. "Stay out of this!" The officer cleared his throat. "Ma'am, did you authorize construction beyond recorded boundaries?" She didn't answer directly. "We were correcting an issue." Correction, funny word for trespassing. The officer looked at me. "Do you want to press charges?" I looked at my son again. "Then back at the half-built fence cutting across my lawn, I just want my land back," I said quietly. Karen leaned closer to me and whispered so only I could hear, "This isn't over. The HOA controls the main entrance road. Don't forget that." Funny word for trespassing. The officer looked at me. "Do you want to press charges?" I looked at my son again. "Then back at the half-built fence cutting across my lawn. I just want my land back," I said quietly. Karen leaned closer to me and whispered so only I could hear, "This isn't over. The HOA controls the main entrance road. Don't forget that." I didn't react, but I understood what she meant. The only paved entrance to the subdivision, it crossed the edge of my outer acreage. Land I never included in HOA filings. Land they assumed was common access. I watched her walk back to her car, still pretending she won. She thought moving my fence was power. She had no idea the entrance to her entire neighborhood sat on property she never checked. And I don't argue about land. I adjust it, legally. The next morning, my mailbox was stuffed with bright orange papers. Emergency HOA vote, violation notice, access review pending. She moved fast. I had to give her that. By noon, a message went out to the whole neighborhood saying I was threatening community access. My phone started buzzing. Some neighbors were confused. Others were angry. Karen had flipped the story overnight. At 3 p.m., my internet went out. By 5 p.m., a tow truck was backing into my driveway. I stepped outside. "What now?" The driver looked uncomfortable. "HOA says this vehicle is parked on restricted roadway extension." I almost laughed. My driveway had been there longer than the HOA itself. Karen walked up slowly, sunglasses on, smile back in place. "Until access rights are clarified, that strip is shared infrastructure." Shared. There it was again. My son was watching from the window. I could feel his fear without turning around. Don't hook it, I told the driver calmly. Give me 5 minutes. Karen folded her arms. Or what? I didn't answer her. I made one call. Not loud, not dramatic. Just one call. When I hung up, Karen smirked. Calling your little veteran friends? No, I said. Calling the county recorder. That was twist number 2. See, when I bought the outer acreage years ago, I split it into 2 parcels. One held the house. The other held the strip that touched the main road. The HOA documents only covered the inner parcel. They never checked the second one. The tow truck driver's phone rang before he could attach chains. He stepped aside, listened, then looked at Karen strangely. Ma'am, dispatch says there's a title flag on this property. We can't tow anything from here. Her smile faded again. That's impossible. Right on cue, a county SUV rolled up. Not police this time, land management. The officer stepped out holding a printed map. We received a boundary dispute request, he said calmly. It appears the paved entrance overlaps privately owned parcel 14B. Parcel 14B, my parcel. Neighbors had started gathering. Whispers grew louder. Karen's voice sharpened. That road has been public use for 10 years. The officer nodded. Use does not equal ownership. Silence hit harder than shouting. One older neighbor raised his hand slowly. Are you saying the entrance belongs to him? The officer didn't hesitate. According to county records, yes. You could actually hear the air shift. Karen stepped closer to me and lowered her voice. If you block that road, you'll trap families, kids, emergency vehicles. She was trying to paint me as the villain now. I looked at the officer. I don't plan to block anything. Karen blinked. But, I continued calmly, access agreements require signatures. The officer nodded slightly. Without a recorded easement, continued use requires property owner consent. Ups and downs. For a moment, neighbors looked at me like I held their freedom in my hands. Then Karen seized it. He's blackmailing the entire subdivision, she shouted. You see this? This is what he wanted. Murmurs grew louder. Tension rose fast. My son stepped outside this time. He stood beside me, small but steady. Karen pointed at him. Your father is about to shut down your friends' homes. That crossed a line. I bent down to my son and said softly, Go inside. Then I stood up straight and looked at everyone. I have never blocked that road, I said clearly. But you moved my fence. You tried to tow my truck. You filed false reports, all without checking who owned what. I let that sink in. Then twist number 3 started forming. I won't close the entrance, I continued. But starting today, commercial deliveries, HOA contractors, and board-authorized work crews need written permission to cross my parcel. Gasps. Karen's face drained. Most HOA power came from contractors and control. Without access, meetings couldn't function. Landscaping contracts couldn't operate. Even their private security patrol route crossed that strip. She tried one last move. You can't control public safety access. I'm not, I replied calmly. Emergency vehicles always have right-of-way. I already confirmed that with the county. The land officer nodded again. Karen looked cornered for the first time. But then she pulled out her phone and said something that made even me pause. Fine, she snapped. Then we'll vote to fine you daily for hostile interference. Let's see how long you can afford that. She thought money would scare me. She didn't know something else yet. Something bigger than fences. Something filed months ago, quietly. And when that paperwork surfaced, the entrance wouldn't just require my permission. It would require my signature to legally exist at all. 3 days later, Karen stood at the entrance with a folding table like she was running a checkpoint. She had cones out. A big printed sign read, HOA Road, Private Community Access. She was smiling again. Too confident. When I pulled up in my truck, she stepped in front of it. You don't get to rewrite community rules, she said loudly. A few board members stood behind her like backup. I rolled my window down. Move the cones. She leaned closer. We voted last night. Daily fine starts today. $500. $500. Neighbors were watching from their cars. Some confused, some scared. Then she snapped her fingers. A man in a polo shirt walked up holding a clipboard. Per HOA authority, this road is now restricted to residents in good standing. Good standing. I stepped out of my truck slowly. Interesting, I said calmly. Because that vote you held? Karen's smile tightened. Completely legal. That's funny, I replied. Since the county hasn't approved your road dedication request. Her face changed. Silence. One of the board members whispered, "What dedication request?" That was the moment. I walked to my truck bed and pulled out a rolled document tube. I opened it on the hood. County seal, fresh stamp, dated 2 weeks ago. I filed a formal notice of non-dedicated private access, I said clearly, meaning this road was never legally transferred from my parcel to public or HOA control. Murmurs exploded. Karen stepped forward. That's not possible. We've maintained this road for years. Maintenance, I said quietly, is not ownership. Twist number 4 hit hard. I pointed to a highlighted line on the document. And since the road was never properly dedicated, any HOA claiming authority over it, without my consent, is committing recorded title interference. The man with the clipboard slowly lowered it. Karen's voice shook now. You're bluffing. Right then, a white county truck turned the corner. Timing matters. The county official stepped out holding a notice. We're here regarding an improper access restriction report. He looked at Karen's cones, then at her sign. Ma'am, who authorized you to restrict use of parcel 14B? She tried to speak. This is community property. He didn't argue. He handed her the paper. According to filed records, the entrance road sits on privately retained land. Until a lawful easement agreement is signed by the owner, the HOA has no authority to control or restrict access. Dead silence. One neighbor actually said, "Wait, so he owns the entrance?" The official nodded. Yes. Karen stepped back like the ground shifted. But she wasn't done. She raised her voice, trying one last time. Fine, then we'll sue you. We'll claim prescriptive rights. 10 years of public use gives us claim. That was her final card. I looked at her calmly. I already addressed that. Confusion crossed her face. 6 months ago, I continued, I installed formal private property. Permissive use only markers along the strip, legally documented. That resets any prescriptive claim. The county official nodded again. Correct. You could feel the shift. Not loud, not dramatic. Just heavy. Karen's power was built on confidence, and it was collapsing. She tried to grab the sign behind her like it would save her. You planned this? No, I said evenly. I prepared. Then came the final blow. The official added, additionally, the HOA's attempt to fine the property owner for exercising lawful boundary rights may constitute harassment. That will be reviewed. Gasps. The clipboard guy stepped away from Karen entirely. One of the board members whispered, You told us this was secured. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. I looked at the cones blocking the entrance. Then I said the line everyone would remember. You moved my fence by 6 feet and forgot to check who owned the gate. The county official gestured to the cones. Remove these immediately. Karen stood frozen. The board members started pulling the cones themselves. Neighbors began driving through again, slowly, carefully, looking at me differently now, not as the problem, as the owner. Karen didn't scream this time. She just stared at the road beneath her feet, realizing it was never hers to stand on. And the craziest part? I still hadn't used my strongest move yet, because owning the entrance was one thing, but controlling what could legally be built on it, that was something she never saw coming. A week later, Karen resigned after the board voted her out in a packed meeting, where the county warning letter was read out loud. The HOA signed a clean, fair easement agreement with me. No tricks, no fake authority, just respect. They paid to restore my fence exactly where it belonged and dropped every fine. One neighbor shook my hand and said, You didn't fight dirty, you fought smart. I smiled and looked at my son playing near the gate. I didn't serve this country to lose my land to paperwork games. The road stayed open, families stayed safe, and for the first time, the neighborhood understood something simple. Ownership isn't loud, it's lawful.